Welcome to Doing Okay. I'm Dan.
I'm Olga.
And today we are talking about Fear Street 1994, part 1 of 3, a trilogy of horror event on Netflix.
It's Halloween in July. Ooh.
All right, so we're going to do a few things here. We're going to talk about whether this is worth watching. We're going to talk about spoiler-free, what is it about? We're probably going to do like 80% spoiler-free, and then at the very end, maybe we'll say a few. I don't even really have many spoilery things to talk about, really.
Yeah, I might.
Oh, she might.
Ooh.
Okay. So why don't we start with what is Fear Street?
Fear Street is a trilogy of horror movies that are connected by a single kind of location, a single town. It's about facing off against one primary big bad antagonist and the different ways that she manifests to haunt and terrorize everybody.
And as only part 1 is out, we don't even really know how the various ones fully connect with each other, how much overlap there's going to be, but they all take place in different time periods. We're just going to talk about part 1. So the way this is working on Netflix, which I think is really cool, is that every Friday in July going through, there's going to be another part. And so you only have to wait a week for the next one. And I think that makes for that's like a very uniquely streaming thing to do that I think is really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, Netflix has clearly been reluctant with its series to air them weekly as opposed to dropping them all at the same time for like binge watching. So the fact that they're willing to do this and spread out the love with this movie trilogy is really nice, and maybe even a sign pointing them in a different direction that I personally would be looking forward to occasionally.
Well, we'll see if it pays off for them. Hopefully it does.
That's true. We'll see how many people stick around for the third one.
Yeah. So as far as 1994 goes specifically, it follows a group of friends and a younger brother as they have to deal with the fact that their town, Shadyside, has been cursed for hundreds of years by a witch. And basically, every so many years, there is a killing, like a violent mass murder killing that happens in the town. And the idea is that the witch possesses the killer and makes people kill each other.
Yeah.
And then they sort of fall into the latest spree of attackers and such.
So there's usually some kind of serial killer that fits the bill of, a movie villain on its own. So the second one is going to be like Friday the 13th. It's going to be, camp based. This one starts off being very Scream.
Yeah. In general, I think that this movie in general, I think, is definitely playing with the idea of Scream, and it's definitely going off of 90s and 70s slashers. As far as the plot goes, I don't think I can go any farther than what I said without spoiling stuff. But okay, what did you think?
I really enjoyed this movie. I mean, I would say I'm still a relatively new convert to like slasher thrillers and even paranormal horror movies. I don't have like a deep dive of a lot of those, but have dipped my toe in the water a lot thanks to you. And so this one did a really good job, in my opinion, of playing with some of the tropes. Still, I wouldn't necessarily say like innovating, but feeling fresh in its take. I really liked all of our characters. There's no one that I straight up didn't enjoy or was like waiting to die or, rooting for their death.
Yeah. Which is interesting because sometimes that's on purpose in these movies.
Right. You're like setting someone up to be like, oh, they're just obviously going to be bait for the killer. And it wasn't obvious in this one.
Yeah.
So I have to say, I really enjoyed this experience. It was something I was looking forward to from the trailers. And I think that it met my expectations and maybe even exceeded them.
Yeah. I thought it was a ton of fun. I think the important thing to say off the bat is that if you're someone who wants it to be like scary, like it's probably not going to scare you that much. I'd say it's comparable to maybe like Scream 4. Like there is gore, there is violence. If you're like not someone who's very brave, like who is scared, you might be scared. But if you're someone who's like, I'm a horror person, blah, blah, blah. Like this is a slasher in like the truest sense of just like being fun with it's like a Halloween movie more than a horror movie, which I think might bother some people. I'm not sure how much the tone's going to stay between the various parts of the trilogy if it's going to get darker or not. I mean, it definitely is gory.
Yeah, it definitely has some like squeamish inducing kind of moments that for those of us like myself are like, I don't like that particular body part having something happen to it. There's like maybe one of every kind of body part that will have something to happen to it. So you are forewarned.
It's not like a baby horror movie. Like it still is R-rated, but
yeah, this one nailed its tone consistently throughout, and I never really knew what was going to happen next.
Well, that's an interesting thing. So, like, I remember seeing a bunch of people's reviews and stuff talking about how predictable this movie is. I think that's kind of a funny thing to say for a slasher movie because that's like kind of the point.
Yeah.
Like the whole idea of the formula is there and known, and we're in a weird place with slashers where we are post Scream and we're post, the entirety of Scream, and so it's like, how much more is there to postmodern twist on things, especially if you're still doing it as a slasher and not like talking about the Conjuring movies or something, right?
Yeah.
So it isn't, like you said, it's not reinventing the wheel. It is a fun slasher movie that just feels like modern. Yeah. That's basically like...
Which is interesting because it's set in 1994. Yeah. And I think you mentioned that was the complaint some people have, is that it didn't feel like 1994 to them. But I don't think it felt like it was taking place in the modern day either.
Yeah. I don't necessarily mean modern in that, like, they talk modern or like they don't have cell phone. Like, it's set in 1994. There is IM, there is, corded phones, all that stuff. Yeah. And I was in the 90s, but I was a little youngin', so I'm not the best person. They have a ton of 90s music. To me, I just didn't care as much because I was just having fun. I think that they just talked like people. They had a few slangs, words from the 90s. I don't feel like they had anything that was anachronistic dialogue wise. But what I really mean when I feel modern is it just has, I mean, first of all, visually, it's probably like the best looking horror and slasher movie that's ever been made. The
visuals were really good.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's debatable because obviously there's like a high artistry in some of the early ones, like the original Halloween and stuff. But as far as like the way they use the sets and the colors and the quality of the camera, like it looks like a modern movie, which in and of itself is not, something we've got a ton of with these slasher movies. But definitely has the diversity of cast and diversity of ideas and backgrounds. And they take the formula and pick and choose the things that they care about, right? So it's like we still technically have a final girl, but she's not the only capable person in the whole world. Like most of the characters are at least a little bit fighting back. They hint at things like, oh, drugs are bad or sex is bad, but they don't really actually seem like they're punishing people for their choices. It's definitely more subtle than something like Scream, but it is still playing with ideas, and I just think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. We also have a character who's like the lore master and typically the person in the movie who knows the rules of the paranormal or knows the rules of like what happens in a slasher. Their character arc goes a very specific way, and I think that they played with, at the very least, like the order that some of those things happened, if not just like whether or not things happened to them at all.
Yeah. There's a lot to say about this movie that's hard to dive into without spoiling things, but one thing I really liked about it, as someone who generally actually isn't huge on like the supernatural rules and blah 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 and magical aspects of these things, I thought they did a very good job of establishing the rules, sticking to them, and having the characters be smart enough and logical enough to try different things that seem like, okay, with this rule set that we think is happening, what do we do in response to that? Oh, that didn't work, or that isn't actually true. We were guessing and we were wrong. Let's move on to a different idea. And I feel like they, I definitely think they were smarter most of the time than an average group.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons they're so likable is, I mean, you feel bad for them going through what they're going through, but even so, you're like, they're rolling with the punches and there's not a lot of like, this can't be happening. And they're just like, we're haunted. Someone's trying to kill us. it's paranormal.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
Yeah.
And therefore we're not like hesitating to get into the drama. And also I would say that this group is it starts out smaller than a lot of other groups. There's like a lot less characters in this movie than there tend to be.
Yeah.
The world building is fleshed out, but
Yeah.
I just feel like usually we're introduced to a lot more like in the Scream movies.
Random people to kill off.
Yeah, or like in Freaky that we saw relatively recently. Or maybe not recently. COVID has messed with my mind. But like, the point is that usually there's a huge cast of characters and they're slowly like trimmed down, and you definitely have trimming of the fat, but you have a core group that you just like enjoy watching a lot.
Well, let's narrow down slightly and just talk about the protagonist, Dina. And I think she's very interesting because I can see people not loving her. Personally, I really found her a lot more interesting than most final girls. She is a little abrasive, kind of just rage-filled from the beginning. It's definitely not the normal, like I'm looking at my books and then now I have a knife and blah.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely a different style.
Yeah. I feel like in a lot of other movies, her friend Kate would be the final girl, although Kate has her own stuff going on that also prevents her from being a final girl. I mean, there's no one who completely fits the bill. I feel like all of them take a certain aspect of it. And yes, her being very angry, very resentful and bitter is like something that usually is saved for a sequel.
Yeah.
Like someone who's been through the trauma of being stalked by a killer and then is like trying to get over that and hates the world and what it means. But she's like bringing that energy from other terrible life
She's
events.
like the punky, cynic kind of character, as opposed to being the bookish one or the one who's very what's the word I'm looking for? Like not sexed up, the opposite of that.
Puritanical.
There you go.
We got there. Yeah. Which is apt considering there's a witch in this.
Ooh.
So
maybe she wasn't pure enough.
Oh.
All right. Anything you want to say spoiler wise? So we'd be spoilering.
Spoilers. Alert. Go away. Watch the movie. Come back for the last 2 minutes. So now that it's safe, I really, really was sad several times when both Kate and Simon were killed because I felt like we were in the clear and I was just like, no, but like they made it this far and they didn't do anything like outright stupid. But, of course, they're like, well, let's talk about the future. And it's like, no, don't do that. Their deaths were like a little gross and that was upsetting as well.
Specifically Kate's.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Like
I feel like we've seen Simon's a million times. But,
but like it was juicy as well. Juicy deaths are not my thing. But moving on to Dina and Sam, it's like, again, you think you're in the clear and we were finishing this movie and we're like, what is the sequel going to be? What's the second one? And the fact that we come in and Sam has now been possessed and claimed.
Well, and the thing is, to me, like, I wasn't surprised that there was like and then one more thing, but I honestly thought it was going to be Sam actually kills Dina or Sam gets killed. Like the fact that honestly, they kept playing with my thing of like, is someone going to die now or are they not? Like, because that's the thing. When we got to the grocery store, I was like, oh, are they all going to survive? Is it going to be one of those kinds of movies where it's like, okay, our randos on the side got slashed and stuff, but our core cast is our core cast and I don't actually have to worry about them. So then when they killed them, I was surprised. And then when they didn't kill Dina or Sam, but just had her become possessed, which is still scary, and, having Dina tie her up is cool, like, I think that was a nice way to go with it. Yeah. Now, it leaves me with a lot of questions about the next movie, because, yes, we know there's the connection of having the summer camp, and that Britta from Community is going to tell us all about it, and then turn into Sadie from Stranger Things. And so, but the question is, how much is that all, like almost all going to be in the past? How much like current meaning 1994 are we going to get?
Yeah. And how are they going to bookend the sequel with the events of this movie and the 1600s, which is the third one, to make this like work and make it make sense? I mean, like That's the thing. I'm assuming that there's not going to be enough forward momentum for unless like Sam escapes. Like that might be a way that they tie back into action in the 94 time period. But overall, I feel like it's going to be told through like narration.
Yeah, I guess my question is, how uninterrupted do you think we'll be once we're in the 70s? Like, do you think she'll start telling the story and then we'll get the whole story? Or do you think she'll tell like a few scenes and then Dina will cut in and something will happen, they'll have to go somewhere, whatever, and then she starts telling the story again? Like,
I think that they should bookend it because you want to be invested in the world that they set up. Like, I don't want to be pulled back and forth. I almost want to be convinced that I've like forgotten it's taken place so I can just like watch these other characters and like care about them.
And that's how the trailers make it look.
But that doesn't necessarily mean.
I don't know how much they're trying to trick us.
Right.
I mean, the other thing is I'm nervous about the sequels because, first of all, I care more about 94 than I do about yet another summer camp. And the 1600s I really don't care about. But maybe they'll get me to. I don't know. But I think the thing is, how do they get me to care about the summer camp when we know everybody besides like two of them die for sure? And like we know who the villain is. We know like they can't. I mean, I guess they could discover things we don't know because she's telling them the story for a reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you
make it matter?
Make it.
I feel like the only way you do that is actually by pulling us out of it. And I mean, we know like Sheriff Good has some connection to the 70s as well. So like what maybe again his like background actions and how he'll chime into the story or something like that as well.
I think it would be cool if she was an unreliable narrator. If like we got like one version from her and then we started hearing other things from other people and they weren't adding up or something like that. Like I think it'd be cool if she actually like ended up being possessed or something.
Still. That would be cool. Or it was like a witch herself now or something.
Well, I mean, there's the thing that's interesting when she says to them on the phone, she's like, it never ends. Like just because you got away and you died and you came back to life, like she's not going to give up on you. And so what has that meant for her as a character? So that's interesting.
It is a question we have. I'm still excited to see what the trilogy has in store. But yeah, I would be perfectly fine walking away from this trilogy with only like really liking
the first one,
this one, Fear Street 1994, and still having like rewatchability with it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I have trouble picturing them ruining the first movie for me. But
we might eat our
knock
words.
on wood. I don't know. I just feel like even if I don't like where it goes, this feels like enough of a self-contained story that, you know, okay, the last 3 minutes might lead somewhere stupid in the future movies, but otherwise I get a good story of character development and of fun and horror that's pretty self-contained.
So on that note,
we will maybe see you next week. I don't know. We're going on vacation, but we will try to figure it out.
Yeah. And if you've seen Fear Street 94, leave your thoughts in the comments down below. We'll be reading them. Let us know what you thought. Are we completely off the base? Have you read the book?
Yeah, because we haven't. We haven't even mentioned that. Yeah. But I know the books aren't like a one-to-one thing. Yeah.
But maybe that gave you preconceived notions about what this would be. So
thank you so much for listening. And I hope you're doing okay.